12 families. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. It appears that most of you are outside America, right? Many of them. So thank you for joining us. We would not delay this. We'll get started. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishnaprastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktitirtha Swaminatha Namine. Namaste Krishnapadaya Prabhupada Shatatmane Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhaktitirtha Iti Namine. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishnaprastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminatha Namine. Namaste Saraswadevam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadim Paschate Desatarine Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Nityananda Avadutendur, Vasudha Prana Vallabha, Janava Jivita Patihi, Krishna Prema Prada Prabhu, Padmavati Sutta Sriman, Sachinandana Purvajaha, Bhavonmatta Jagatrata, Rakta Gaura Kalevaraha. Namo Namo Aniruddhaya, Hrishikesha Indriyatmane, Nama Paramahamsaya, पूर्णाय निबतात्मने स्वर्गपवर्गद्वाराय नित्यं शुचि सदे नमः नमः हिरण्यवीर्याय चातुर्होत्राय तान्तवे. Thank you very much. So we were in chapter 2. I just want to get to this proper verse. What verse did we stop at? 62. Hare Krishna Sunil. So in the second chapter, we are coming to the end of the second chapter. And right at the beginning, Krishna makes an analytical study and dissects existence analytically. And what does he attack here? Why is he doing an analytical study? What is he trying to accomplish? Initially, in the first chapter, we see that the mind of the devotee, the mind of Arjun, goes through intense suffering. So the suffering produces consciousness which requires addressing. Suffering has its use, it's a double edged sword, especially if one has spiritual association. Suffering allows us to make immense progress. So the intense suffering allows Arjun to raise questions about life, which we normally wouldn't do. So suffering is beneficial because in most cases, a pre-qualification for spiritual progress is material dissatisfaction. Material dissatisfaction is a pre-qualification for spiritual progress. Material complacency and spiritual progress do not normally go hand in hand together. It doesn't work that way. There has to be a challenge to the fulfillment that we obtain at the body and the mental level. Unless the body and the mental level of happiness and fulfillment is challenged, we would not go searching deeper in search of fulfillment. So, suffering has its use. So, once the suffering is experienced by a living entity and the living entity has answers, even though pain exists from the circumstances, the suffering stops. Because now the living entity has moved beyond body, beyond mind. They're able to focus on their existence and their connection to Krishna. So now initially Krishna is causing complexity and he is bringing on suffering, or rather he is putting Arjuna in such a situation where Arjuna is being asked to do a task or follow dharma which requires intense contemplation. There's intense mental suffering on the part of Arjuna. So there are three different levels of consciousness, and the levels of consciousness are based on the guna. So in the region of the heart, there are three different gunas that predominate. They all exist together, and depending on who is going to be surmounting the other, there's one guna which always predominates. So you have the mode of goodness, sattva, sometimes predominating. So sometimes we feel very favorable towards sadhana. Sometimes we have rajas predominating over sattva and tamas. And when there is rajas predominating, we are automatically focused on the future. The future becomes very questionable. We start questioning our future. We start thinking, what am I going to do? How is this particular situation of mine that I have created going to exist 2 months down the line, 3 months down the line? How can I plan? Planning requires rajas. Planning requires rajas. Creativity is required. But beyond that, there is really of no use because it becomes a distraction. It is a huge distraction because the living entity starts focusing on the future. When you focus on the future, what is it called? Anxiety. When we focus on the future, what are we worrying about? Predominantly, we are worrying about whether we would have the same facility for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. I have created some facility. Am I going to be having the capacity to prolong it? It may sound wonderful. It might be something like, career growth. It could be some kind of an agenda. I could be planning something wonderful in terms of my business. I could be expanding this and so on and so forth. Ultimately, it boils down to, am I going to be able to continue having the same standard or better standard of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending? There's a problem? Okay. The next step is it's in my mouth. All right. So the same standard, whether we are going to be meeting it or not. Now, depending on the modes that are predominating, there would be certain challenges. There are challenges with the mode of passion. It makes you think about your future intensely. This is not planning. This is anxiety, thinking about something which basically may not happen. Oh, I'm experiencing something, and there could be something very calamitous happening to me. So what happens is, in general, we are visualizing so many different complex situations that can happen to us that we undergo the suffering, mental suffering, and stress associated with those situations much before they happen. This is karma. Something may not even happen, but then you're anxious so much today that you're experiencing the suffering at a mental level of an event which may not even take place. So that is anxiety, right? So we are observing the environment, we are looking at a few other things, we are making and jumping to conclusions. So the mode of passion and consciousness that is predominating in the mode of passion, rajas, is not so wonderful because it can make you very anxious. The mode of ignorance is even worse. The mode of ignorance makes one focus 100% on the body. And one who focuses 100% on the body and the connections to the body is an extremely selfish individual. And such an individual cannot experience any happiness beyond the happiness that is allocated to animals. The animals cannot really think beyond the body. That's the reason why the Shastras make a statement that you do not hold a wild animal guilty. A man kills someone, he is to be incarcerated. A tiger kills someone, that's nature, because the body of the wild animal is such that it would force the animal to act in one manner or the other. The serpent is supposed to strike. That's its nature. You cannot change the nature of an animal. We don't question that. But a man doing the same thing becomes a problem. So someone who is very tamasic and is in the mode of ignorance is fundamentally so conscious of their body that their state of consciousness is like that of an animal. So it's even worse. So not such a wonderful proposition. Neither the mode of ignorance is so good, neither the mode of passion is so, nor the mode of passion is so wonderful. Both of these are challenges because they are subhuman and they are not conducive for spirituality. The mode of goodness, sattva, is conducive for spirituality. It is conducive for spirituality because it allows us to be able to focus on the present. Now we are in the mode of goodness. As long as you are not really thinking about something right now, if you're really hearing me out, you are in the mode of goodness. If your mind is wandering, there is a little bit of passion. If you feel that you're dwelling in the past and you're thinking about some event that has occurred in your life in the past, and that event is sitting on your head, like some people really cannot forgive others. They take insults to their heart to such a degree that they can never forgive. And certain incidents in their life are so much a part of their psyche that they are not able to process that incident and move forward. Those incidents turn into diseases in different part of the body. Disease occurs in the body because we are holding consciousness that is not conducive. So when we hold memories that are not conducive, which are not okay, and we have not released them, then that transforms itself into disease in the different parts of the body. Okay? And these days, almost everyone is diseased. There is great disease, especially, as your parents here, Suhas, they probably can tell you that their focus on their own life has probably increased dramatically after you and your sister left. It's not been easy for them because you tend to focus on things in a far more grave manner when you don't have things to do. So I know because my parents went through the same challenge when myself and my brother stepped out. It was very challenging for them to cope, right? So similarly, that particular incident, I've noticed that my mother's health started slipping. It accelerated once I left, my brother left because of the anxiety and so many other things which come into life. So I noticed that the mental state can cause disease. It can cause disease. The mental state can cause disease. If we hang on to the past can cause disease, especially if it is traumatic. It could be relationship issues. It could be some kind of stigma. It could just be some kind of, abuse or any kind of traumatic situation that has occurred way down in the childhood, and that could cause disease as one grows up and they're not able to release it into the atmosphere. So this is the mode of ignorance. So the mode of ignorance, tamas, causes disease. Passion does not allow you to focus. The mode of goodness has its advantage. We are able to focus and we are able to stay in the present. And being in the present is required while you're chanting the holy names and when you're listening to Krishna Katha. You cannot be in the past, neither should you be in the future. You have to be in the present. But my question is, there is a challenge even with sattva. Sattva, the mode of goodness, the material mode of goodness, has its use just as much as the airport transit lounge has its use. You leave home and you go to the airport and you want to take a flight. But beyond that, the airport really has no other use because it allows you to take off. It allows you to go to your destination of choice. It allows you to go from one place to the other, and it's the platform. Beyond that, the airport has no other use. Would it make sense for us to dwell there? Would it make sense for us to get delayed? I remember getting stuck in an airport for 12 hours. It's torture in a transit lounge, right? So similarly, the mode of goodness, sattva, is a platform for the sadhaka. The sadhaka should use the mode of goodness to take off. What we are interested in lies beyond the mode of goodness. It does not lie within the material mode of goodness. But what is a specific challenge with the mode of goodness? There are some specific challenges. The mode of goodness would make you desire peace at all costs. Even the mode of goodness in the material nature is not so wonderful because the person becomes a pacifist. We are not interested in peace or war or trauma or the mental satisfaction, mental peace, and so on and so forth. We are interested in pursuing the truth at all costs. And while in the pursuit of truth, if we are going to be challenged at the mental level, we have no problem with it because that's a small price to pay to know Bhagwan. So spiritualists do not keep mental peace as an agenda. Those who keep mental peace as an agenda are conditioned by the mode of goodness. They are conditioned by the material mode of sattva, where they feel mental peace is more important than anything else. But a true spiritualist does not mind being put into challenging situations if those challenging situations force them to surrender, and by surrendering, they can know Krishna. So desiring challenges, desiring Krishna's proximity is the nature of a spiritualist. And for that, they don't have a problem paying a price. So mental peace is not the goal of spirituality. That is the goal of the mode of goodness, which is also material. We should not think that the material mode of goodness is wonderful. Material mode of goodness is also such that it can make us complacent when we shouldn't be. I do not want to be agitated. I do not want to take risks in serving the Lord. I do not want to do this. I do not want to do that. This is the material mode of goodness, preventing us from going to the next level. It can become a liability. It is an asset to some extent. It can become a liability. It's just a matter of time. If you do not recognize it, it can become a liability. So complacency and desiring peace at all costs, even at the cost of performing duty, even at the cost of Krishna's pleasure, is the mode of goodness. Now, if you notice in the first chapter, what was Arjun seeking? Peace. He was constantly telling Krishna, Krishna, I need peace. I don't want to fire these arrows. I don't want to kill them. I don't want conflict. I don't want this. I don't want violence. We do not want to be called violent. We don't want to be this. That's not the focus of a spiritualist. A spiritualist's focus is Manmanabhav Madbhakto Madhyajimam Namaskuru. We want to be following Krishna's orders. Whether those orders can cause trauma in our life, whether it can agitate us, whether it disturbs us physically, that's secondary. That is not a consideration. That is not a consideration at all. We do not want to pursue peace. We don't want to pursue things which are not the objectives of spirituality. The objective of spirituality is to surrender. Right? What does Krishna say in the end? He says, Sarva dharman parityajya, mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasmi masuchaha. Sarva dharman parityajya. Give up all varieties of secondary dharma. Chala dharma, upadharma. Dharma which is moved away from your identification of being my servant. Your being my servant and duty that is born out of being my servant is the only duty. Every other duty is subservient to that particular duty. So if you recognize that particular duty and you follow that, everything else will fall in place. Right? Because the mode of goodness even, which is sattva, is wonderful. It is much, much better. It's highly elevating compared to passion, compared to ignorance. Even that can become an obstacle on the path of devotional service, because devotional service goes even beyond the mode of goodness. So Arjuna's specific challenge in the first chapter was, he was participating in a mode of goodness situation. I do not want to agitate things. I don't want to spoil things. Is there a special route? Is there anything that we can do where we don't want to be fighting here? And Krishna says, no, these are my orders. Do your dharma as a Kshatriya. You are a Kshatriya, you follow my orders. That is how Srila Prabhupada's disciples established temples. Srila Prabhupada used to tell them, go to London. And they used to take their little bag, no money, $40, $50, whatever they had. No one to receive them in London. Husband, wife, and child will land in London. And then they would start searching for a place to stay. They don't even have a place to stay. Young Americans, very young people, they're walking around in London, and then they're agitated. They don't have enough money. They're trying to set up some kind of a mission of Srila Prabhupada. They ended up staying in a homeless shelter. Mother Malati and her son, they ended up staying in a homeless shelter. They used to live in a cardboard box, following the orders of their guru. This is going against the mode of goodness, which says you should have peace at all costs. They followed the orders of their guru because guru is representative of Krishna. Guru says, go to London. They pack their bags and they go to London. Finished. And what happened? Something wonderful happened. How could people living in the homeless shelter meet the Beatles in 1970? Not an ordinary thing. People used to faint. They used to leave their bodies in Beatles concerts. Literally, you have seen those old concerts you can see in YouTube or one of those places when the Beatles are on the stage. People screaming, fainting. It's unbelievable to even think in the Western world that you could go and meet the Beatles. But these devotees were staying in homeless shelters. Krishna made arrangements. Why did Krishna make arrangements? Because they surrendered to the words of their guru, and the guru was a pure representative of Krishna. So this is going against the material mode of nature. Going against material mode of nature means what? Transcending. Transcending means to transcend what is the norm. There is a certain norm which the whole world follows. But then we have taken up a situation where we want to go against that norm. We are transcending it. By transcending, we are elevating ourselves beyond the modes of nature. That is how we experience surrender. Surrender is experienced when we follow the orders of the Guru and we go against the considerations of body, mind, peace, so on and so forth. Mental peace is a desire and a need for the mind. This is a material aspiration. Physical peace and physical well-being is the bodily demand. When we go against what is normally considered to be okay for the body and for the mind, we are actually transcending, provided those orders come from the Lord. We don't punish the body unnecessarily, because the body is also the property of the Lord. But if it requires for service, we don't have a problem inconveniencing ourselves. Are we prepared? That's the duty. I remember my spiritual master telling us that one day, this was long after Srila Prabhupada had left his body. This was, I think, 1990s. One night, he saw Prabhupada in a dream. And Prabhupada came in a dream and he opened a closed door. A door was closed. Srila Prabhupada appeared and he stood and he opened the door. The moment he opened the door and he moved away, there were host and numbers of people coming through the door, and they were all Africans. So my spiritual master immediately got a message that he has to travel to Africa to help those souls. So he was in a perfect situation in Washington, D.C. He had a perfect ashram, which had a very successful restaurant running. Everything was going smoothly, right? But 2 days after he got the dream, he was on a flight to West Africa. To no one receiving him, no one to meet him, very little cash, and I do not know which country in West Africa. He reached West Africa and he used to sleep on the steps of the Hindu temple. They never used to allow him in. He was a sannyasi, but they could not allow him in because they didn't trust him. So he used to sleep on the steps of a Hindu temple. For food, he used to eat the leftover vegetables in the market. The cabbage and whatever is being thrown in the market, discarded. He used to pick them up, he used to wash them, he used to eat. So this is going against bodily comfort, mental comfort, putting ourselves in a vulnerable situation, because the Guru has ordered so. That particular step of his, that preaching mission in Africa became so prominent that there were many, many countries in West Africa which practically got delivered by that particular trip because he started actively setting up in Africa. Right? So that is the beauty of us being able to surrender to the Guru's orders, and that allows us to be transcendental, that allows us to go beyond the body, beyond the mind. Because even sattva is not so wonderful because it is material. It can cause challenges. We want to focus on orders. We don't want to focus on what is convenient to us. Right? So now let's go to 260. 261. Tani sarvani samyamya yuktashita matparaha vasehi yasyendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. Why is he known as a man of steady intelligence? What allows him to fix his senses and keep them under control? The intelligence. The hierarchy is the soul, intelligence, mind, senses. Someone who has steady intelligence has the ability to control the mind, control the senses. But how does intelligence become steady? By coming in contact with sadhu, guru, shastra. Shastra, Bhagavad Gita, in India, it's almost fashionable, even in the West these days. Everybody has a copy of the Bhagavad Gita at home. But the book Bhagavad Gita is passive. We buy it, we keep it on the shelf. Sometimes it's in the puja room. It receives arati every day. That's passive. The active distribution of knowledge is done by sadhu. Someone who has read the Bhagavad Gita, who is following the Bhagavad Gita, has the ability to share his or her experiences of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Those realizations are more important because they increase our faith. So there is this active principle of Shastra, that is the sadhu. There is the passive principle, which is the book. To ensure that the sadhu is speaking according to the book is the role of the guru. The guru ensures that the sadhu is speaking according to the book by his teachings. He is the monitor, like a principal in an institution. Right? So one who comes in touch with sadhu, guru, shastra and can connect his intelligence, buddhi, to sadhu, guru, shastra, then such a buddhi is said to be very sharp. Krishna says, even in the 16th and the 17th chapters, that cut this ignorance with the sword of knowledge. Cut this tree of ignorance with the sword of knowledge. The sword of knowledge is what sharpens intelligence. One who is constantly coming in touch with Shastra would remember Shastra. They would be able to remember Shastra at the time of reckoning. And you would be able to apply it. And such a person is known as someone with steady intelligence. Intelligence is not normally steady. It's unsteady, fickle. Because intelligence has lost its sense of purpose. Intelligence is not connected to the body, is not connected to the mind. It is fragmented. It has lost its purpose. It is like your driver of a chauffeur or taxi driver, charioteer, who has simply lost his mind. He has no ability to take proper decisions. You get into the car, and he can take the car, and he can go wherever he wants, and he can cause an accident. But someone whose intelligence has come in touch with Shastra is coming in touch with something which is steady, which for 5,000 years, 10,000 years, millions of years has held steady. And such a person is called one of steady intelligence. Right? So you will have to come in touch with Shastra for us to be able to use this. What do you mean by saying come in touch with Shastra? What exactly does that mean? What do you expect? What are we expected to do? Living the Shastra should be the aim. When we read the Shastra, we should recognize that this is how I have lived. Reading the Shastra is preliminary, experiencing it is the aim. When you read the Srimad Bhagavatam should come alive. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita should come alive. Bhagavad Gita should come alive because we have lived according to the teachings. Everyone needs a role model. The scriptures provide role models. And we caliber ourselves and we basically use that as a benchmark to try and see where we are in situations. That's the purpose of scripture. So let's go to 62. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsahan Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamaham Kamat Krodho Bijayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. Now, what does this mean? It means that when we go window shopping, when we walk around the mall, we are watching something on the windows of the mall and we develop some attraction to it. So there is some contemplation. The mind is contemplating, how will it be if I have this? How will it be if I have that? Normally, this is a situation where a man considers a person, a man considers a woman, or a woman considers a man. This is the greatest calamity where there's contemplation. Immediately, the opposite gender is seen. Unfortunately, it's a natural attraction. It starts. The contemplation starts. This contemplation of constantly thinking about someone of the opposite gender, just contemplation. And these days, it is not an ordinary occurrence. It is something which can occur throughout the day. Every advertisement, be it for a car, for a pharmaceutical, for a drug, for a house, for a loan, is associated with somehow or the other stimulating sex desire. Because they have understood, the advertisement agency has understood this particular verse very well. The advertisement industry has understood this verse. Marketing gurus have understood what this works, how this works. They know that if somehow or the other we can attract people to base qualities and base senses, right? If we can somehow or the other attract people to base qualities and senses, right? If you bring them down to the base qualities and bring them out of focus, the contemplation increases. It's easy to contemplate because it's nature. It's lower nature, and since everybody, water travels down, similarly, nature, it's very easy to take on lower nature. Very difficult to take on higher nature. The advertisement agency know that very nicely. So they allure people almost like saying that if you buy this product, you can also have some other experience associated with that product. So there is this mental contemplation which they are doing, which is manipulation. So they immediately, when we see that, there is some contemplation going on in the mind. And when this contemplation goes on day in, day out, day in, day out, what happens next? We become attached to the idea. Initially, there is some thought process, day in, day out, and then it becomes into attachment. Right? Somehow or the other, that little thought that was existing in the mind has now become an attachment. Right? And such an attachment, then, if it is not fulfilled, results in what? Frustration. It results in frustration, it results in anger. So, what is lust? Lust is defined as a focus of a living entity in giving pleasure to his or her senses. This is lust. Love is our focus in giving pleasure to Krishna's senses. If we are in the center, lust. Krishna is in the center, love. If Krishna is in the center and we are in the periphery, we are constantly focused on giving pleasure to his senses. If we are in the center, we even expect God to serve us. Right? We even expect, Bhagwan, it's your duty to serve me. I'm in the center. I'm coming to your mandir. I'm breaking the coconuts. I'm climbing the hill. I'm doing mundan. I'm doing so many other things. I have put 1,000 rupees or $1,000, whatever, into the hundi. Serve me. Do this for me. This is lust. It's better that at least we are approaching God for it, but this is lust because we are in the center. Krishna is in the periphery. We are saying, this is my life. I'm here. These are my senses. I need pleasure. Krishna, you provide for it. This is lust. Simple definition. There's no contemplation here. There's no need to think too much. This is lust. When we enter into devotional service, when we come in touch with Sadguru, when we come in touch with Shastra, when we come